The day I lost my husband was the same day I became a suspect in his death. I'm Claire Anderson. I work in HR. Nothing fancy. 3 months ago, my husband Nathan collapsed at work. A massive brain hemorrhage. No signs. No warnings. Just gone. The kind of death that doesn't give you time to prepare or even say goodbye. At the hospital, I stood beside his body, numb. Machines beeped softly around us. I was still wearing my badge from work. Still holding my phone like I'd get a text from him at any moment. And then I heard it. His sister, Samantha, whispered to their mother. I told you she was bad luck. Not, are you okay? Not, we're going to get through this. Just that. Like I hadn't just lost him too. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. But inside something cracked. The next morning they showed up at my house. No flowers. No condolences. Just cold, suspicious eyes. They said I must have done something. Because Nathan had life insurance. Because I was the only one listed as beneficiary. Because apparently being a grieving wife isn't enough. You also have to prove your innocence. I stood in the doorway, still wearing the same clothes from the hospital. And they asked me how much the policy was worth. Like my husband's death was just a transaction they missed out on. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not because I didn't have words, but because I knew whatever I said, they'd twist it into another reason to hate me. That house we were standing in? Nathan and I built it together. Charleston, South Carolina. He grew up here. His grandfather gave him a piece of land as a wedding gift. Just big enough to build a modest, one-story home. We spent 2 years saving, designing, measuring cabinet heights, arguing over paint colors, laughing at Pinterest disasters. It wasn't just a house. It was a timeline of our love. But now, the same people who never liked our marriage, who never came by unless they needed something, wanted it all. Not because they needed a place to stay, but because in their minds, if Nathan was gone, everything he touched should be theirs. Including me. Including my pain. Including the walls we built with our bare hands. And standing in that doorway, with Samantha's perfume too strong and Margaret's eyes full of disdain, I realized something. They weren't here to mourn. They were here to erase. Nathan and I never had children. Not because we didn't want to, but because life didn't give us room. A few years ago, he was working at a software firm in Atlanta. It paid well. But his boss, he tore him down quietly. Little jabs in meetings. Public corrections. Snide remarks about performance. It chipped away at him. He started waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, sometimes shaking. He'd stare at the ceiling and whisper, I don't think I'm okay. Eventually, he stopped going to work, saw a psychiatrist, took time off. 3 months later, he quit entirely. And for a while, we just survived. I covered the bills with my job. We cut expenses, sold a second car, cooked everything at home. But slowly, Nathan came back to life. He smiled more, slept better, laughed again. The man I married returned. And when he finally got hired at a smaller company in Charleston, doing back-end systems for local hospitals, he said something I'll never forget. It pays less, but my heart doesn't hurt here. Around the same time, my mother had a car accident. A distracted driver ran a red light. Spinal cord damage. Paralyzed from the waist down. She was living alone in our family's old house in Beaufort. Stairs. Narrow doors. A bathroom too small for a wheelchair. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, crying quietly as I read through care home brochures. And Nathan said, let's bring her here. We'll build something she can live in. Something we'll all love. So we did. His grandfather had a corner lot in Charleston. Quiet street. Decent schools. Just a 10-minute walk from Nathan's childhood home. He signed it over to Nathan as a gift. Said it was a reward for being the only one in the family who didn't ask for money. We used it as equity to get the mortgage. It wasn't easy. Banks didn't like Nathan's short work history, but we fought for it together. And we designed every inch of that house. Open kitchen, low counters for me, wide doors, 0 steps, and smooth wooden floors for Mom's wheelchair. Nathan even insisted on a little private garden outside her window. It's not just about accessibility, he said. It's about dignity. We moved in on a Saturday. I still remember the smell of fresh lumber and paint, the echo of our voices in those empty rooms. It felt like a beginning, but it turns out, for some people, our happiness was a threat. The day after we moved in, Margaret dropped by unannounced. She walked through the house like it was hers to inspect. Didn't say hello to my mom. Didn't say congratulations. Just stared at the hallway and muttered, "So this is where all the money went." Then she looked at my mother and said, "You're lucky, huh? Got into an accident and ended up with a brand new house." My mother said nothing, but I saw her lips tremble. Nathan was in the other room, and when he came out he heard it too. He didn't yell. He just looked his mother in the eye and said, "There are things you don't say, Mom." That was one of them. She left in silence. And that was the last time she visited our home while Nathan was alive. After the funeral, I stayed with my mother for a few days. We needed quiet. A break from condolences that felt more like performance than comfort. Margaret and Samantha didn't attend the service. Didn't send flowers. Didn't call. But oddly, they still asked about Nathan's life insurance by email. I ignored them. I wasn't ready to speak to anyone, much less the people who had spent years tearing us down. On the third morning, I decided to go home. I told Mom I'd stop by the house to get some clothes, paperwork, anything that reminded me of Nathan. When I pulled into the driveway, something felt wrong. The blinds were open. The porch light was on. And through the front window I saw movement. I parked, walked up slowly, put my key in the lock. It didn't turn. I frowned. Tried again. Nothing. Then I knocked. A few seconds later, Samantha opened the door, wearing socks, holding a coffee mug, like it was just another Sunday morning. She blinked. "You didn't call." I stared at her, speechless. Then Margaret appeared behind her and said flatly, "We've decided to stay here now." I looked past them. Everything was different. Our couch was gone. The photos from our honeymoon, the dining set we saved for, the throw pillows Nathan picked out because they were exactly the color of your eyes, gone. In their place, cheap new furniture, boxes stacked in corners, a mounted TV that hadn't been there a week ago. I stepped back, my voice barely audible. "What is this?" Samantha shrugged. "We sold your stuff. Got a good price." It felt wrong. You know, using furniture that belonged to a dead man. She said it like she was commenting on the weather. Oddly, I didn't feel angry. Just hollow. It wasn't just a couch. It was where Nathan fell asleep reading. It was where we watched the rain together. They didn't just sell furniture. They sold pieces of my life. For a price I'll never know. My hands trembled. "And the photos?" I asked. "Threw them out," Margaret said, pouring herself tea. "No one wants to see that stuff now." I turned to leave. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was caving in. But just before I stepped off the porch, Margaret called after me. "You should have planned better, Claire. This is family property. Nathan would have wanted us to have it." I didn't answer. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. I drove straight to my mother's apartment, sat on the floor, and stared at the wall for an hour. I talked to the police, but legally, with no forced entry and my name still on everything. It was considered a civil matter. Then I called my lawyer. The thing about grief is it doesn't always look like tears. Sometimes, it looks like silence. Like sitting in a lawyer's office at 8 a.m. with a folder full of mortgage documents and a copy of your husband's death certificate. My lawyer, Mr. Walsh, was calm, professional. He skimmed through the papers and nodded. Your name's on everything, he said. The deed, the mortgage, the utilities. Everything is yours. I had insisted on that years ago. Not out of distrust, but because Nathan's previous job had left him uninsured and unstable. We didn't want to risk losing our home if something happened. So when the mortgage was approved, we put everything in my name. He joked about it once. If I die first, at least you won't owe the bank anything. I laughed. He didn't. Turns out he meant it. What Margaret and Samantha didn't know was that I had already spoken to a lawyer 6 weeks before Nathan died. Nathan had a family history of strokes. It scared him more than he let on. So one night, after a quiet dinner, he looked at me and said, "If something ever happens, Claire, don't let them take anything." And I didn't. We had structured the mortgage with a default clause. If no payment was made in 4 months, the property would be seized and auctioned. That clause wasn't meant for this situation. But after I found them living there, sipping coffee like they owned the place, I stopped making the payments. Intentionally. The house wasn't just tainted. It was stolen. And I wanted it gone. But I didn't tell them. Margaret and Samantha stayed. They hosted cookouts in the yard Nathan planted. They invited relatives who'd never visited us before. They even painted over the bedroom walls the soft green Nathan had picked a gone. Meanwhile, I waited. I spoke to the bank. I filed notices. I kept everything quiet. And on the 122nd day after Nathan's death, the official foreclosure notice was delivered. Samantha called me in a rage. "How dare you do this? This is illegal. We live here." I stayed calm. "It's not your house. It never was." Margaret tried a softer approach. Said she was sorry for everything. That we were family and we should stick together. I listened. Then I said the only thing I could. "Nathan warned me about you. He told me to be ready." And I was. Then I hung up. The foreclosure went through faster than I expected. Mr. Walsh said it might take longer. But maybe everything was in order. Or maybe the universe was just done being patient with them. The house was listed for auction. The bank's notice went up on the fence just outside the front porch. Neighbors started whispering. I didn't go by. I didn't need to. But I heard stories. Samantha panicked when she saw the notice. Apparently she had already quit her job, thinking the house would be hers for good. Margaret had quietly sold her own home months earlier to pay off gambling debts. They had nowhere else to go. No backup plan. No savings. Just a stolen house. And the assumption that I would fold. They called, texted, emailed. I ignored all of it. Until one night, Margaret showed up at my apartment building. She buzzed my unit. And when I didn't answer, she waited outside. I came down anyway. She looked small. No jewelry. Hair undone. Not the Margaret I knew. She said, "I'm sorry for everything. Truly." Then added, "Can you just lend me a little? Enough to get us a place." Behind her in the passenger seat of an old sedan, Samantha sat with her arms folded, refusing to look at me. I stood there listening. The same woman who once said I was a curse was now begging the so-called curse for help. I took a breath and said, "Nathan left me with one clear instruction. If anything ever happens to me, protect yourself from my family." Margaret opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. "We're not family anymore. You made that decision the moment you stepped over my threshold without permission. I suggest you figure things out the same way I had to alone." And for a second, I saw it. Not just guilt, but fear. The kind of fear you feel when you realize the person you thought was weak just became untouchable. Then I turned around and walked back inside. Samantha shouted something behind me. I didn't hear it. Didn't care. A week later, I found out they'd been evicted. Forced to move into public housing on the edge of the city. It wasn't big. It wasn't clean. And it wasn't quiet. They were seen arguing loudly in the hallway. Neighbors complained about smoke from their makeshift balcony barbecues. Eventually, someone started a petition to get them removed. It was like chaos followed them. Or maybe they carried it with them. And as for me, I finally slept through the night. After everything, I didn't want another house. I wanted peace. Nathan had always believed in sunlight. He used to say, "People need it like water. It keeps you alive, even when everything else is falling apart." So I looked for a place with light. Somewhere safe. Quiet. Small enough for two people who'd seen enough noise for a lifetime. I found it. A corner condo with 24-hour security and a wide balcony. Not fancy, but solid. My mom could will herself through the halls easily. And the view overlooked a small park filled with old oaks. I asked the movers to place Nathan's favorite chair near the sliding glass doors. The one he used to sit in when he read to my mom during her recovery. She still smiles when she sees it. That chair, that spot. Feels like he's still with us somehow. The money from his insurance and the auction was more than enough. We didn't need much. Just room to breathe. The neighbors here are kind. No one asks invasive questions. No one assumes. We bake. We water plants. Sometimes we say nothing at all and it feels perfect. Margaret and Samantha? Last I heard, Samantha's boyfriend left. Margaret is under investigation for forging a will related to a relative's estate. They've burned every bridge they had. And I've built something better in silence. No grand declarations. No dramatic confrontations. Just quiet wins. The kind that don't need to be posted. The kind you feel in your chest when the world stops spinning. And sometimes that's more than enough. Sometimes I look back and wonder, what if I had forgiven them? Let them stay? But then I think of Nathan. And the garden he built. The way he defended my mother. The way he made me feel safe. Like no matter what came for us, he'd meet it head on. So I live in a way that would make him proud. I keep my promises. I protect the people I love. And I don't let anyone make me small ever again. Because the truth is, family isn't just who you're born into. Sometimes, family is the person who planted a garden for your mother. When no one else even thought to ask if she needed help opening a door. I still talk to him sometimes. In the mornings. When the sun hits just right. When I'm sipping coffee and mom's humming to herself. I close my eyes and whisper. I kept the light, Nathan. Just like you said. And that's how I know he's still here. Not in the house we lost. But in the peace we earned. In the morning light. In the way my mother smiles when she waters the garden. And in the quiet. Where love no longer has to shout to be heard.